A contemporary portrayal of Islam in Germany. How the German public deals with the fear of Islam, by Junaid Salam. According to a survey in May 2006, about 83% of the asked persons agreed on the statement that Islam is a fanatic religion. About 62% think that it is backward, while 71% think that it is an intolerant religion. 60% think it is not democratic, and 90% of the asked persons believe that Islam discriminates women. This is according to the German Institute for Human Rights, released in April 2008. Well, this is a quite shocking statistic, isn't it? But as somebody who lives in Germany, I must confess that the figures of this statistic didn't surprise me that much. Almost in every report, article, interview, news, etc., Islam is often portrayed with negative aspects. Problems within Turkish families are almost every time presented as problems that derive from Islam. But we all know that this isn't often the case. Honor killings, for example, cannot be justified by Islam, since self-justice is forbidden by Islam. Unfortunately, platforms for forming the opinion of the masses have become TV soaps, newspapers such as Bild, this is similar to The Sun in the UK, or Die Welt, similar to the NY, New York Times in the USA, or Der Spiegel, it is similar to the news magazine Newsweek. This mass media is systematically indoctrinating German-speaking people's opinion because they broadcast bad news about Islam on a regular basis. And since Pavlov's experiment with the dog, we know that animals as well as human beings can be conditioned in behavior and thinking. Pavlov's description on how animals and humans can be trained to respond in a certain way to a particular stimulus drew tremendous interest from the time he first presented his results. His work paved the way for a new, more objective method of studying behavior. So-called Pavlovian training has been used in many fields with antiphobia treatment. An important principle in conditioned learning is that established conditioned response, for example, salivating in the case of the dogs, decreases intensity of the conditioned stimulus, bell for example, is repeatedly presented without the unconditioned stimulus, in this case food. This process is called extinction. So we can conclude that the Pavlovian training used for antiphobia treatment can also be used for triggering phobia, especially Islamophobia. I think that many of us have watched the movie Clockwork Orange. In this movie, you can see how Pavlov's methods have been misused at the end. And if we go back into time, we will come to realize that certain ideologies, such as German fascism, benefited from Pavlov's scientific achievements. One of the Nazis' infamous rhetoricians was called Goebbels. He combined Pavlov's ideas with mass media. During that time, they sold a very cheap radio called Volksempfänger. And he combined this with his rhetoric skills. By combining these three elements, he denigrated Jews, Gypsies, Polish people, disabled people, and people with opposing political views. Combining these three elements was like mixing nitro and glycerine. The effect was devastating, not only for the so-called enemies of the German people, but most of all for the German people themselves. Because since World War II, the Germans didn't lose their negative image in the world community. They still have to pay compensation money to the victims of the Holocaust. And since Germans used this scientific knowledge to control the masses during World War II, we know that they can use it again today. There is no guarantee for German Muslims not to become victims of a similar political strategy today. Elisabeth Noelle and Thomas Petersen wrote in an article in the national newspaper Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung that Germans already had a negative stance against Islam many years ago, but that there is an increase in recent years. This can be due to the Islamophobic content published in the mass media since 9/11/2001. To be fair, we must say that there are Islamophobic tendencies in other European countries too, but why is Germany so different in comparison to the other European countries? I think that's because Germans aren't used to live and act in heterogeneous societies. This can be explained by the historical fact that Germans didn't make many experiences in colonies like their European neighbors, for example Portugal, Spain, Holland, France, Italy, England and Belgium. All these countries had colonies across the globe, and therefore they learned how to cope with other people's languages, religions, cultures and traditions. Because they wanted to protect their interests, such as trade routes and instructing the native people in their fieldwork, etc. The Germans never needed to do this. That's why they often assimilated or segregated minorities in their countries. It was often between these two extremes. For example, Eastern European people living on German soil for decades barely do not speak their mother language, nor do they live according to their own traditions. And here comes my conclusion. My aim is not to offend anyone, but to focus on the status quo in terms of Islamophobia in Germany, and that it shouldn't be underestimated by the world community. I personally have many Muslim and non-Muslim German friends and co-workers. I like them very much because most of them are hard-working, frankly speaking, straightforward people with a structured lifestyle. As I mentioned before, the problem is the mass media, which controls the minds of these people. So don't let anyone control your mind. Form your own opinion by talking to Muslims, visiting mosques, and reading Islamic books written by Muslims. And my last word to you all, I wish peace and love to everyone in the world. I love all of you. And as a matter of fact, you are all sons and daughters of Adam and Eve, which makes us all a big family.